It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back, you beautiful souls. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is a Tuesday, which means we broach a number of health-related topics, our mental health, our relationship health. In this case, one of probably the most important conversations we're likely to have as a parent. It's been said that a happy couple equals a happy child. Is that true? And to what degree is that true? Well, family therapist and registered social worker and good friend of ours now on the show, Kim Abrams, joins us in the lounge to share her wisdom, her considerable wisdom and direct experience in the space, because we've all been in relationships. We all know how difficult it can be to navigate those, and that's real life. In fact, some of the joys, the depth of our relationship can only be found once we really know each other and we find out about each other through arguments, through conflict. But when a child is involved, it becomes a whole different dynamic. So first of all, does that statement ring true? Happy couple, happy child?
It's a statement I totally agree with. You know, I think if you are a parent who's in a loving relationship where it's consistently stable and you're feeling secure with your partner, that just spills over onto your child. So parents have to think about their emotions are very much contagious to their children. So if you're feeling happy and secure within your relationship, it's somewhat easier to then have a happier home. And then in turn with that, we have children who feel more secure and very well loved, and they have an idea of the world that's pretty much predictable. So that all, you know, enhances their self-esteem.
Continuity, we know, is key for a child, and it's not barely ever what you tell them that they learn, it's what you show them, what they feel, especially in the younger years. On the flip side of that coin, if you've got a relationship that is constantly at loggerheads and in a very negative space, what sort of impact can that have on a child?
So it's important, I think, to know that no relationship is perfect. It doesn't exist. We can only strive, you know, to have healthy relationships, but perfection is something that we can't really obtain. So, you know, if we're in a relationship where we're constantly, like you say, at loggerheads with our partner, we're feeling quite angry and irritated towards them, your child picks up on that. They are literal sponges, and they will learn how to interact with other people, and they will also learn how to be in a relationship based on how you as a couple are interacting with one another. So I try to say to parents, think of your relationship as the emotional environment where your child lives in and where your child learns how to function within a relationship themselves.
And a big part of that is the conflict resolution. You can give your child the tools to be able to be a fully functioning, positive member of society, because we are, in our workplace, going to be engaging in these moments of conflict, and you've got to learn how to deal with that. What are the best ways as a couple to reinforce that? Because you can't just sweep under the carpet when you're having a fight. You've got to live it, and you've got to get that out of the way and deal with it. And that can often be some of the joys in a relationship, is realizing, okay, I made a mistake. This is where, you know, she begins and ends. This is how he needs to be treated. That's how we learn and grow. How do you transfer that deeper understanding and ability to deal with relationships to your child?
Yeah, so children, I think the nice part about raising children is that they are very observant. So you don't have to perhaps put too much focus on spending a lot of time explaining things to them, but the most important thing is to show them how you deal with conflict, how we resolve conflict. Because conflict can be healthy, disagreements are a part of life, but it's how we resolve those arguments in the presence of our children particularly that will help them to understand how they need to do that as they grow up and as they start to form their own relationships. It's not easy. It's much easier said than done.
Well, as long as you've got the intention in the back of your mind, in your heart, then I think you're moving in the right direction. Never, ever, ever use the child as a weapon of war in that space. I think that could potentially be very damaging. And we'll get into that. We're going to continue our discussion with Kim. Happy couple, happy child. Maybe you want to weigh in with some comments on social media. Maybe you've got some gems to throw into the mix.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You're live with Expresso. Thank you so much for tuning in. We love having you stop by for a visit. Now, earlier in the show, family therapist and registered social worker, and again, our good friend Kim Abrams, has now joined us to chat about how the state of our relationship, that relationship between parents, can influence or impact the well-being of a child. And we're going to continue that conversation right now, because being a healthy couple, it's all about a two-way flow of information. We've got to, maybe this is one of your first tips, but You've really kind of driven home the idea that it's easier said than done. So where do we start? If we are aware, self-aware that, and know that we have an unharmonious relationship, what are some of the tools we can use to improve our own relationship so as to prevent it from getting to the point of impacting our child?
So I think if you are a parent who has self-awareness, I mean, you're halfway there. If you're able to identify, yes, we have issues in how we're relating to each other and how we're resolving conflict, it's really important then to take the necessary steps to try to work on that, and that means taking responsibility for your relationship. So if you feel as though, you know, your conflict and your relationship dynamics are beyond your control, then I think it's really important to seek the assistance of a therapist or a trusted person who can be objective and help you through your conflict. You must remember, children will pick up on your verbal arguments and also the non-verbal things. Oh,
they will
yes.
feel the vibe.
They will absolutely absorb
Don't ask your child who's right or wrong in a particular scenario. Now, we make light of it because it does affect everyone, and I think we all kind of need to sometimes take a step back and see the lighter side, but it can have very, very damaging effects on a child.
Absolutely.
Maybe the best red flag would be not necessarily what we see in our own relationship, but what we see in our child. When do we know, when can we identify that our relationship and what's going on between us is impacting on our child? What are some of those major warning signs? So
I always like to think of major warning signs are very much dependent on the child, because each child has a different personality.
You know your child,
yeah, and you do know your child best. So some of the behaviors we see are children who act out quite aggressively and have really, you know, dramatic, angry outbursts, and they also struggle to self-soothe. They struggle to kind of get themselves back down to a level of calm. This is
not just, you know, we're not talking about 2-year-olds, because...
Yeah, this is across the board. This is across the board. But usually this is a child who's watched their parent respond in an angry way and struggle to regulate themselves. So that's one type of behavior we'll see. But on the other side, we also see children take on an emotional caregiver role towards their child. So this is the child who will say, oh, mommy or daddy, are you okay? You know, I don't want you to be sad. They kind of take on that parental role. So, and that, you know, we find endearing and caring, but it's often a form of anxiety.
And it's not fair.
It's really unfair for a child to be put in a position where they have to feel like they need to look after you.
I think worse still, they might even just disconnect and withdraw completely.
Exactly.
I just keep thinking about, especially in the formative years, probably because of the kind of space I'm in as a parent right now, can this impact on your child's ability to have a loving and positive and effective relationship when they're older?
Absolutely. I think research and studies have changed a lot over the course of time. So now we know that the way that children observe things in their household in terms of relationship dynamics is often what they bring through to their own relationships as they grow up. So if you haven't been able to have good modeling, then how are you able to sustain or even form a relationship with somebody else if you don't have a secure base from which to draw upon?
Can we be proactive in that space? How much? Because it's a good way to learn, to teach. I think the best way to reinforce an idea is when you've got to explain that to someone else. What are some of the best ways that we can have that conversation and maybe as a family or just even as a parent, be proactive in developing positive ideas around relationship?
So, you know, conflict, like I say, it can actually be a healthy thing. It can be a teaching tool for your child. So if you know as a couple that you are going through a phase now where things are very awkward and there's a clear atmosphere in the home, it's important to bring your children into a conversation and say to them, you know, mommy and daddy are having problems, but it's got nothing to do with you. So it's really important to take the child out of it so that they know it's got nothing to do with them. But, you know, and then assure them that you're going to resolve it. But then you've actually got to put those steps in place. So it is being polite to each other.
But maybe this holds you to some kind of responsibility in that space. And I suppose, in turn, this affects the more extreme breakdown in relationships. And if you can't resolve the relationship, at least that conversation has been started. See, Dad was wrong, and now we've sorted everything out. I really appreciate the fact that we've looked at this from both sides, but I think it's just about a bit of empathy, not just for each other, but for your child. Think about what your child might be experiencing when you go to those extremes, when you can't resolve something, and maybe that's a good way to put the brakes on. You're not thinking about yourself, but your child becomes the priority. Nice one.
That's it.